Good day everyone, and welcome to the channel. It's Londononion here with a Back 4 Blood weapons review. And in this review, we're going to be looking at our third sniper rifle, the Barrett M95. Now, as part of today's discussion, we're going to be including my proposed weapon-centered deck build, following the review. Now, although the stats and specs of the weapon speak for themselves, I will be giving my evaluation on the weapon's capabilities in combat. This will involve tactics that suit the weapon's strengths, and an overall score. Now, evaluation will take place on 4 main fronts: ammunition economy, crowd control, pressure combat, and mutation deterrence. Before we get started, it is important to note that a weapon's shortcomings can be supplemented with one's card selection, but evaluation will mainly be geared toward the weapon's base attributes. Additionally, one's character choice can make a weapon somewhat more forgiving, meanwhile difficulty selection can accentuate or soften the downsides. So starting off with the Barrett's ammo economy, which is essentially how long a weapon can practically last throughout a given level. The Barrett is a bolt-action sniper rifle that holds 5 rounds. For those that have been familiar with my assessment of ammo economy, this naturally gives the Barrett a significant advantage in rationing and controlling ammo expenditure. Naturally, as a sniper, its accuracy has the highest reliability when compared with other weapon classes, particularly when aiming down the sights. At the same time, however, the crosshairs on the weapon are extremely wide, diminishing its hipfire reliability beyond point-blank range. Not to mention, the recoil is rather sharp. If you ask me, however, though this is technically a limiting attribute of the weapon, hipfire use with the Barrett is essentially abusive to the weapon and will naturally waste ammo, almost like using an SMG for sniping purposes. Plus, since it is a bolt-action weapon, recoil is inconsequential to the overall performance. The Barrett has the highest damage, shot for shot, compared to every other weapon, inflicting 132 units of damage. This damage effect takes place from 22.5 meters and below. Its minimal damage, regardless of range, is 95.4. Long story short, this is a one-shot to one-kill / multi-kill weapon, regardless of ferocious and monstrous corruption cards. As a slow bolt-action weapon with only 5 rounds, this forces a user to pick their shots carefully. With such a high shot-to-kill ratio, conserving ammo is a natural byproduct of using this weapon effectively. Moving on to crowd control. Depending on one's corruption cards and main events in a given stage, crowd control will be more or less an important constituent in one's survival. Higher difficulties will likely create a greater need for effective crowd control. The Barrett will have an extremely difficult time trying to eliminate crowds. With only 5 rounds per magazine, a slow bolt-action animation, a natural high demand on precision, and a below-average reload speed, crowds of Ridden will laugh in the face of the Barrett. It may be worth noting that the mobility is also low, but even with higher mobility, the main effective use of the Barrett is with ADS, which will inherently cause slow movement. One small silver lining with the Barrett is its untouchable penetration. I haven't been able to test how many subsequent targets a single round can go through and eliminate, but one subsequent close-by target will receive the same damage as the first. Even filed targets with a significant space will perform upwards of 90 units of damage. It would be fair to conclude that a handful or more of Ridden will fall to a single round. The only other alternative to using this weapon in crowds is to hipfire at point-blank range. Practically, however, an effective secondary is highly recommended. Moving on to pressure combat, as I coined the term. This refers to how efficiently a weapon can eliminate targets in multiple areas, or how well a weapon can complement one's ability to engage and eliminate multiple scattered targets at varying ranges. The Barrett has some ability to perform pressure combat, but it is naturally disadvantaged due to the slow bolt-action animation, so even with perfect use of the weapon, the Barrett can only handle so much pressure before becoming overwhelmed. Typically, this is the story with every weapon, but for the Barrett, this is even more so. The shot-to-kill ratio is there, the efficiency is not. Also, as discussed with ammo economy, the Barrett, as a natural byproduct of its attributes, has a heavy demand on player skill. With virtually limitless effective range, this is an advantage, but if you ask me, close range is the least advantageous range for the Barrett, as it is a slow-paced and calculating weapon. Mid to far range, however, allows one to be as proactive as they need to, especially when one is far enough away to the point that they aren't detected by Ridden or mutations. Moving on to mutations, the Barrett pretty much makes fodder of mutations. Most of them will crumble with 1 to 2 well-placed shots. Naturally, tall boys can withstand the most punishment, requiring 4 to 5 rounds without any weak spot damage. With weak spot damage, however, this could be limited down to 1 to 2 rounds. The main advantages that can come with using the Barrett is being caught off guard or misjudging a given situation and having to deal with mutations at close range. Hence, it is important to keep most encounters at mid to far range. The Barrett is not a run and gun weapon, unless you are a god at Back 4 Blood. Most of the time, when using the Barrett, unaware enemies are your best friend, especially mutations. But even when they are aware of a cleaner's presence, the Barrett has extremely high stumbling capability. Tall boys, again, are the most resistant, but even they can be stumbled with a good amount of reliability. Armored corruption cards will demand an extra round, but this is a small hurdle, easily handled by the Barrett. Mutations in general fear the presence of this weapon. Moving on to the scoring, the Barrett's ammo economy is in the exemplary range. Fire is naturally restricted, the magazine is non-cumbersome, and the shot-to-kill ratio can easily be higher than 1. So I give it a deserving 5 out of 5. Crowd control is an area of poor performance. The magazine size, reload speed, and bolt action animation are the main detractors. The penetration is the one advantage that it has. An alternative weapon likely will have to take over when it comes to crowd control. So I give it a 1 out of 5. As for pressure combat, the Barrett is significantly limited in its ability. Due to the bolt action, the fire rate essentially maxes one's kill frequency to 1 Ridden every 2 seconds, not including multi-kills of course. Pressure combat must take place at far range or mid-range at the closest for higher volumes of Ridden, so I give it a 1 out of 5. As for mutations, the Barrett is almost unparalleled in its ability to handle them. It will kill, if not stumble, mutations that survive the first round, and with stumbling, the bolt action is inconsequential. This is a natural fighting weapon. User error and proactivity is all one would need to worry about. So again, I give it a 5 out of 5. Overall, this puts the Barrett at a 12 out of 20. Now that concludes the review, but we will now transition into our deck build for this weapon. Now, generally I would say there are 2 aspects of building a weapon/weapon class specific deck. There is the more strength-based build, and the compensatory/balancing build. A third option would naturally be a hybrid, which is probably the most reasonable, but every weapon is different and has its own strengths and areas of need to varying degrees. Now, with this in mind, on a smaller scale, I will categorize potential card selections into 4 designations: related, compensatory, synergistic, and preferential. Although Back 4 Blood already has designations for cards, I prefer to use my own. And before we get started, it is important to note that there are 1,000 ways to build a deck. The most I can do is showcase how I prefer to optimize this weapon's performance. So starting off with the related cards. Related cards are the ones that directly impact/buff the attributes or effects of a given weapon class. The cards in this category are Controlled Movement and Stock Pouch. Controlled Movement increases movement speed while aiming by 40% with snipers. Stock Pouch increases sniper ammo capacity by 30% and damage by 10%. The mobility of the Barrett is on the low side, so Controlled Movement will naturally aid with this, if on the move while trying to fire. For Stock Pouch, I choose to pass on this one. With such a high economy and damage, I would prefer to use this space for an alternative, which will make more sense when we get to the synergistic cards. Now moving on to the compensatory cards. Compensatory cards are meant to counteract the weapon's main weaknesses, or balance out its areas of need. In the Barrett's case, based on performance, mobility, fire rate, reload speed, and to some extent accuracy will be the main areas of need. To help cover these areas, I choose to employ reload drills, admin reload, cold brew coffee, and front sight focus. Reload drills increases reload speed by 20%. Admin reload automatically reloads your stowed away weapon. Cold brew coffee increases reload speed by 15%, aim speed by 25%, weapon swap speed by 25%, and use speed by 25%. Front sight focus increases accuracy by 20%, weak spot damage by 10%, and aim speed by 15%. Now, it might seem strange that I have reload buffing cards with admin reload. The logic here is, reload drills and cold brew coffee will lower the bolt action time by a total of 35%. Admin reload, on the other hand, will aid with needing to switch weapons while keeping your magazines full. Part of what helps with this is swap speed, which will aid with easing the burden of swapping frequently. The 20% increase in accuracy from front sight focus will make hipfire reliability a little more forgiving where it may be necessary. Moving on to the synergistic cards. These are cards that have impacts to increase areas of strength or work to optimize the effects of other cards or one's choice of character. The cards I chose for this category are Ridden Slayer, March for Death, Knowledge is Power, Reckless Strategy, Tunnel Vision, and Patient Hunter. Ridden Slayer increases weak spot damage by 20%. March for Death increases damage against pinged enemies by 10%. Knowledge is Power increases weak spot damage by 10% and allows one to see their damage numbers and enemy health bars. Reckless Strategy increases weak spot damage by 30% but reduces damage resistance by 5%. Tunnel Vision increases weak spot damage by 5% for every 0.75 seconds spent aiming down your sights. This stacks up 3 times, increases aim speed by 50% but reduces damage resistance by 5%. Similarly, Patient Hunter increases damage by 10% for every 0.75 seconds spent aiming down your sights and stacks 3 times. Accumulated damage buffs will allow the Barrett to inflict an extra 40% of damage. Weak spot damage will have an additional 85% with the inclusion of front sight focus from the Compensatory Cards. With these numbers in mind, not only will mutations be more of a breeze with either weak spot damage or general damage, the Barrett will also be better equipped for making light work of bosses, which is technically not a point of evaluation but still worth mentioning at this point. Our last area of card selection is the Preferential Cards. These are cards that are completely unrelated to the weapon and its strengths/weaknesses, but can still be useful perks, and this is where the most nuance can take place. Given that we have 4 slots left, I choose to give it to Combat Knife, Superior Cardio, Padded Suit, and Ammo Stash. Combat Knife turns one's bash into a tack knife that kills Ridden within a single use. Superior Cardio increases stamina by 20%, sprint efficiency by 20%, and health by 5 units. Padded Suit increases damage resistance by 10%, health by 5 units, but reduces stamina efficiency by 20%. Ammo Stash allows one's secondary weapons to have unlimited ammo, but reduces their reload speed by 20%, specifically for secondary weapons. Combat Knife is ultimately intended to reduce stress of overwhelming Ridden at close range, especially while using the Barrett. Superior Cardio is intended purely to compensate for the stamina deficiency of Padded Suit. And Padded Suit compensates damage resistance penalties caused by Reckless Strategy and Tunnel Vision. The health gains for both cards are simply a bonus. Lastly, the Ammo Stash reload penalty is compensated by reload drills. Now, our last area of discussion is the character choice. Given our card selections and the review for the Barrett, this build is primarily for Jim and Walker. Walker is a potential choice for his general damage buff, and he comes with a level of team defense by increasing health by 10 units, and reducing mutation damage potential by 10% when pinged. Jim, on the other hand, is all offense. His general damage increases by 2.5% for precision kills until damage is received, and it stacks up 10 times. And his weak spot damage is buffed by an additional 10%, creating a grand total of 95% weak spot damage with our card selections. The Barrett can ultimately fit both cleaners. Walker is more of a mixture of offense and defense, while Jim is all stick, which is who this deck is primarily for. Walker can have some alterations though. But as I said guys, there's 1,000 ways to build a weapon-centered deck. These were just my preferences. Otherwise though, that concludes the build. Thank you guys for joining me on this one, and in our next video, we'll be reviewing the M249 LMG, and we'll also discuss my preferred deck build for said weapon. It's been Londononion, and I will see you guys next time.